After everything I've shown on this channel up until now, I believe we are ready to create a project, and the first project I will be creating is a simple API web application where we simply make an API request towards a certain service, get the data and display it on screen. So everything will work. For example, we'll type a name of the city. Let's just say Berlin. Press enter, and we immediately get the data about the weather at this point back. And it's not just the information I've written down here. There's way more information in the API, but I figured since this was a beginning project and the first one, this will be perfectly fine. Clicking the X here removes all the text, and if we, for example, can't find the city, let's just say type W and press enter, well, the previous data will be removed and we'll get an error message from the weather applications API. In this case, they sent us no matching location found. Clicking the X closes this, and that's generally the entire functionality of the application. So let's start coding. Working with external APIs is a bit different than when making your own, in that in some cases we might need to create an account at the API service providers, give them our own information, and get the API key back as a result so that we could start making requests. So the service I will be using today is called weatherapi.com, and I've already created an account before the creation of this video, but for the rest of you, you can either log in if you've already had some work done and thus have an account, or simply click the sign up, which will just make you type and retype both the email and password, check the I'm not a robot, and immediately on sign up you will be taken to a dashboard and you will be presented with an API key. Simply copy the key and store it in the application or in the JavaScript file. So now if you have everything ready, you can pause the video and set everything up. Let's get to our Visual Studio Code and start off with the application. The first thing I'm gonna do is just the Emmet boilerplate. Call this weather app, and I'll also add a header and an h1 as the name of the page, and I'll also write weather app here. Now one important thing, where was it? Now let's close this. This is the title. Now the important part is making a div with the label and the input element, because the functionality of that input element, or the content written here rather, will be used in the API call. So let's just make a div with a class of search, and we'll make a label here for city, search for a city, and an input of type search, which will give us the little closing icon here. Type text doesn't provide that. I'll give it the name of city to pair it with the label. We're not gonna need an ID, but we will need a placeholder. Enter city name. Save, refresh. There are two additional things that need to be done. The first one is adding the script element with the source here, and it'll point to index.js. One more thing we have to do here is specify that the type is module here, which will allow us to use the import and export syntax in the web browser. The last thing needed to do here is link our style sheet to the application. Now, when it comes to the style sheet, it's really not that important. So I'll just come here and I'll paste the CSS I've been using for this project. I'll slowly scroll through here so you can pause the video and write the CSS on your own, or alternatively, it will also be included in the GitHub repository for this video. So let's just do this. So you could also copy the code from there. Save this. And when it comes to the HTML structure and the style sheet here, I believe we're very much done. Now the rest of the thing is working with JS from now on. So before writing any JavaScript code, I figured out that based on the way their API is set and based on the practices we will be using in this video, we won't be able to use type module here. So instead of that, let's remove the type module and also import the utils.js file above the index, which is simply a file that contains the API key, which I will not show here. It's just a constant declaration of the API key, and that's that. Now once that is all set, we will be working with our app by opening it in the live server. So we can start writing JavaScript code now. So I have opened the application using live server, and this is basically what it looks like. On inspection, well, we have some error that some resources couldn't be loaded, but that's to be expected. We're still in the development process, so writing here works, but pressing enter doesn't search for anything. So let's change that. So in our weather app, I have the URL constant part, which is this one. And the first thing we're gonna need is a function to get our data. So it's get data. It'll also be async because we're making an API request, and it'll accept the URL. And this is how we fetch the data. So we'll assign a response variable and we'll await the fetch when it returns the information in JSON. And we'll get the data by awaiting the res.json. Again, JSON is a method that transforms JSON code into JavaScript code, but it's an asynchronous method that only exists if the JSON we got asynchronously. So yeah, in the end we will return the data. Now let's try it out. I'll run the get data function and I'll give it the URL constant. Then we need the API key, which is in the utils directory. Then we have the query, which will be, let's just say, London. and I don't know what this last query parameter is supposed to be, but the default is to leave it at no, so we'll do that. Now we'll save, come here. Is this being loaded at all? Not this one. Oh, right. I forgot to console.log the data. Here it is. So let me just... Right. So here we get the data object back with two properties, current and location. Location, well, is self-explanatory. It's just this. London, city of London, blah, blah, blah. The current is what we're interested in. And we're interested in the following. The condition, which has its icon, but it's missing the HTTPS part before it. And the textual description of the weather conditions. We're also gonna need the exact temperature in both Celsius and Fahrenheit, as well as the temperature, what it feels like. And we'll also need the wind direction, kilometers and miles per hour. So basically that's that. So let's get to coding. One thing to get out of the way before everything is that even with improper and proper input, we have to take care of all the edge cases. So instead of just showing the data, we will have to be showing errors as well. And sometimes in various different applications, errors might be more confusing than the content agreed upon that's supposed to be shown. Luckily, in this application, it's just a little pop-up and the close button, but it might be a bit difficult. So first of all, let's get the variables we need. And the important one is city input, which is the document.query selector. And it's an input inside of a search div with a type of search. Okay. So we have the getData function. Now let's create an async function to display that data. And again, it'll take a URL. So let's get our data first. Await get data, and we'll pass this URL as a parameter. Now, if we do have data, if we get it back, and it has an error property, we'll return a function called display error with well, let's see if I actually do something like this and save. We're getting the data.error.message. So it'll accept a message and it'll be data.error.message. And the return will terminate the function here. Else we'll create a new function called show data, and we'll just pass the data there. Of course, since this is an asynchronous function, I will do a try catch block here, and this will be in the try block, and in the catch block, I don't know, we can just log an error or something. So that's the display data function. Now let's work on the display error function. This one doesn't have to be asynchronous, but it will take a message parameter, and if nothing happens or there is no message, I'll just have the text say error, try again. Okay. Now let's start creating our error. The important thing here is that we need two elements inside of a parent element. That's the text that shows up as the error message, and I'll have a, I don't know, an exit button, close button, kind of like this one here. When on click, it will close the error. So let's create an error container with document.createElement. This will be a main tag, and you'll see why later. We'll also add one of the classes, which is error container. It's in the CSS we pasted a long while ago, this one. Okay. After which we will have to define the close button, and that'll just be document.createElement span, and we'll give it the class list of error close btn. Close btn dot text content is I have a lovely X here somewhere. Okay, here it is. This one. That'll be the text content. And now comes one of the more confusing parts. Since this is a close button, it will need to have an event listener. But at the same time, on clicking it itself, it would also need to remove the event listener from itself on that execution. So what I'll do is create a function here, call it close button event. And on clicking the X button, we're supposed to remove the error container, the whole thing, as well as the event listener from the close button as well. The event listener will be on click, and the function itself will be removed. And now below here, I'll add that event listener. It will be click and close button event. Aside from that, we'll need the error text, which will just be a document.create text node. Now, common misconception, instead of creating an element and just adding it to the DOM, this will simply add the text and like nothing else. Literally no elements surrounding it. So it's just text floating in the ether. and the text we will be passing here is the message we got here from some other function. Now the last thing we need to do is append these children to the error container. So this one and the error text. And after that, the last thing left to do is to insert this brand new element we've just created into the DOM. Let's just first separate these things here. And appending this to the document is done by appending it to the body directly, by using insert adjacent element, which takes two parameters. The first one is where to insert it, like the insert position. It's a string, so it's fairly relative. And the second one is the element we want to insert. And that's the display error function in, I guess, its entirety. So now that we have the display error function, I believe it's time to get the input to work. So let's scroll down here and add an event listener to this input. It'll be on key down. Oops. Here. And we'll have a function. Here we'll have a switch statement with event.key. We also have to grab the event from here. And we'll evaluate one case, whether it's enter or not. The rest can simply be default. And if it is enter, we would like to get the text, that's cd input.value, and we'll get a new URL based on that value. We'll add the constant here, which is the part that doesn't change. And now we have the key parameter, which will be our API key. And we have the query parameter, which will be our text. And this, I guess this is something advanced search with this query, I guess, but we won't need that. And this will be an async function because we will be fetching and displaying the information. Plus the function we will be using here is also well, asynchronous here, so we will need the await. We'll simply pass the new URL and we'll make the request here and display the error if the error property exists, meaning if nothing is found. Else we will create this function and show the data. But for now we'll get an error if we don't have it defined. So let's simply define it here as function show data. Save. And if I write Tokyo, for example, well, nothing's gonna happen because we haven't completed the show data function yet. But if I write something wrong, we'll get the error immediately and we can close it. and it'll work again. Of course, if I press enter key again, it'll just keep adding them. So to combat that, let's go here and create a utility function and name it, okay, utilities, and name it remove all mains. This will remove all elements with the main tag, like this. First, we will do a document.query selector all to get all of the mains, and this will return a node list. Now we will use the array.from to convert that node list into an array, so we can execute a for each function on them. And okay, for each item we want to call item.remove. This will make the main remove itself from the flow. And let's just scroll here on the display error and just call the remove all mains function. Now if we refresh and write something invalid and press enter, we get the error. If we press enter again, nothing changed seemingly, but we did make another API request. We removed the previous error and we put the new one inside. And it happens on every enter, which submits this, quasi form, so to speak. So that's fixed. There's one more thing left to do for this project in order to have it fully fledged and functioning, and that's to create the show data function. And the show data function is really big, let's just say. Now, where is it called? Here in the display data. Display data is called on key down. So let's log the data we get here to see what we can work with. And it's here. Let's inspect the element. And before anything, let's just do this. Okay. Go to the console and type a valid city name. Let's say Los Angeles. So we're getting it called twice for some reason, but never mind. The important thing is that we have on this object we have the current and the location props. So instead of like manually getting data here and restructuring it, I'll restructure it here and get the current and location. I'll do the same thing I did for display errors and remove all mains immediately. This will make it so that there is only at most ever one main tag on the document. Now the first thing we want to do is create the main item, and it'll be document.create element main, like the error, so that it could be removed. And we'll add a class from the class list, and that's main-item. Okay. Now, what else we said we had to do was get the condition, get the temperature, the wind speed, and the location. So let's do that here. First, I'll create the condition block, and it'll be document.createElement article. I'll try to use more semantic HTML. Condition block dot class list dot add, so it looks nice. That's the condition block. And now we also get an image here as well. So we'll pick it up to document dot create element image tag, and conditional image dot source will be so it's this one here. So obviously the browser adds this by itself, but just as a relative link without these slashes, we're gonna have to do that manually and add the HTTPS, I believe it was, and then a colon and current dot condition dot icon. This will make sure the appropriate icon is rendered, and just in case it doesn't, we'll add the alt text. That'll be condition dot text. So that's the image done. Now we also have to take care of the text, and in this case we'll create an element because we need it as a block to take up the whole width of the line. Now conditional text dot text content will be the same we use for alt image. And the last thing left to do here is append the conditional image and the conditional text to the conditional block. It does seem a bit more well, confusing than the rest of the code, so I'll add helpful comments. Block. I added these comments because the rest of the blocks follow the same pattern, so we're gonna be doing the same thing more or less. Now let's move to the temperature. Temperature block, which will also be a document that create element article, and another class list dot add temperature block. Now when it comes to the temperature, we have a temperature text, like it's currently that much degrees in Celsius and Fahrenheit, and the feels like text, but it feels more like this other temperature. So we'll do it like this. We'll create text nodes because they're not elements and they don't have their own widths, heights, and stuff like that. So we can easily fuse two text nodes together, side by side. So it's currently current.temperature underscore Celsius in degrees Celsius, or in parentheses current dot temperature underscore F in Fahrenheit, comma space, and that's the temp text, the first part. Const temp feels like text node, which is the continuation of this sentence, but it feels more like, let me just check in the docs what this is. So this is current dot feels like underscore C in Celsius, or current dot feels like F for Fahrenheit. Okay. Now what's simply left is to append the temp text and feels like text to the temperature block. So temperature block dot append child temp text and temp feels like text. That takes care of the temperature block. Now let's move on to the wind block. Wind block is document dot create element article once again, wind block dot class list dot add. This will be wind block. Now we have a wind text. There are no more images. That was just the one. And this will also be a text node. And we'll have the information about wind speed. So that's current dot wind kph for kilometers an hour, or current dot wind underscore mph for miles an hour, slash the current dot wind underscore dir for wind direction. So this will be like, for example, 3.2 or and 2 in parentheses slash, let's just say S, if the direction of the wind is south. And in the end, wind block dot append child wind text. The last one is the location block, and it'll be slightly more formatted than the previous wind block. Document dot create element article location block dot class list dot add location slash block. And now we're gonna be getting the city, country, and longitude and latitude of the place. So const city is document.create text node, which will contain location.name, like this. Const country document.create text node for location, let me check the documentation real quick. Yep, location.country. Reading the documentation becomes one of the critical aspects of coding, especially coding something very, very custom in vanilla technologies. For geolocation, we're going to create a paragraph and give it the text content. So this is latitude, that's location.lat, and longitude is location.lon. Okay, what's left to do is append the children to the location block. The first one is country. Okay. The second one is city. The third one is geolocation. And there's one more thing left to do. Well, actually two. It's to append all the blocks to the main item, and we'll append the condition block first. Then we're moving on to the location block, temperature block, and wind block in the end. And the second, or actually last thing left to do, is to insert adjacent element, again after end, and this will be the main item. Okay. Oops. Save and remove this. So if I type a name of something, oops, apologies, I cut off my recording for a moment there. So let's try this again. I used Berlin. This time I'm gonna use, let's say, New York. Press enter and changes. Let's say, I don't know, Paris. Let's find something, I don't know, rainy, kinda rainy. Let's go for Dhaka. Okay, partly cloudy. And let's go for something that's invalid, like this here. Okay, as we can see, it removes the record we have already had in order to show us the error message. Now this the whole thing we've been doing today might seem a bit more difficult than it was supposed to be, and that's because we did everything using vanilla technologies like HTML, CSS, and JavaScript, which is exactly the reason why it took so much more work. Starting from now and from here on out, we will mostly be doing full-fledged applications in frameworks and libraries like Vue or React. So there are a couple of different philosophies to learn and pick up, but on the whole it should be easier to work with frameworks and libraries rather than vanilla technologies going forward. Thank you for watching the video.